The day begins slowly, the way all quiet days do. A soft mist hangs above the water, shifting in pale ribbons as the first light touches the surface. The Mississippi moves with a kind of patience that belongs only to rivers, steady, deliberate, eternal. It does not rush, nor does it ever truly rest. It simply is. Along its banks, the land breathes. Cotton fields roll down to the muddy shallows where frogs croak lazily between reeds. The air smells faintly of wet earth and cypress bark. A fisherman hauls in his morning catch, his small wooden boat creaking in rhythm with the current. Somewhere upriver, a distant steamboat bell rings once, soft and far away, like the echo of a memory. It is the 1850s, a country that still believes in its own unbreakable future. The river carries it all: grain from the prairies, lumber from the north, molasses from the islands, and the heavy, unspoken cargo of cotton and human bondage from the deep south. Each bend in the water ties the nation together like the threads of a great loom, one fabric stretched taut but still intact. For centuries, this river has been America's spine. Native nations once followed its currents by canoe. French traders carved their marks into the trees along its edges. Pilgrims, farmers, and dreamers all found their way here, letting the water decide their direction. By the mid-19th century, it is the main artery of an idea: that a people could stretch endlessly across a continent and still call themselves one. The sound of the Mississippi is low and continuous, a hum beneath all things. It gurgles and sighs, shifting between sandbars and drifting logs. Birds skim the surface, white egrets, herons, and small swallows that catch insects just above the current. From the bluffs, the land looks unbroken, as though the river's course has always been this calm, this inevitable. But beneath the quiet, something unseen is changing. The towns that line these banks, St. Louis, Cairo, Memphis, Natchez, New Orleans, are beginning to murmur in different tongues. Newspapers carry words like union, rights, property, freedom. The same river that once connected them now seems to mirror their growing separation, one bank gazing warily at the other. The people along the Mississippi still go about their lives. Merchants sweep the front steps of their stores. Children chase each other down muddy streets. A ferryman repairs his oars, humming a tune that came down from the hills of Kentucky. But even in these simple acts, there's an undercurrent, a quiet knowledge that something vast is gathering somewhere beyond the horizon. At sunset, the water glows like poured bronze. The sky above the delta deepens from blue to violet, then to a soft reddish haze. From the decks of steamboats, travelers lean against rails and watch the shoreline slide past. Lamps flicker in distant windows, dogs bark faintly from the levees. Everything feels still, but it's the kind of stillness that happens before sound, before movement, before history inhales. The Mississippi has seen floods, storms, and droughts. It knows how to wait. And now it waits again. As men argue in taverns, as states whisper of separation, as trains begin to move soldiers instead of goods, the water keeps flowing, pretending not to listen. One evening in a small town near the mouth of the Ohio, a schoolteacher stands on the dock watching the current. She writes in her journal that the river seems darker than usual, the air heavier. She cannot say why. She only notes that the steamboats now carry more uniforms than cargo. She closes her book, folds her shawl, and walks home beneath a sky thick with clouds. Downstream, at a plantation wharf, enslaved men load bales under torchlight. Their shadows stretch across the planks, long and wavering. One looks toward the water and wonders aloud how far it runs, whether freedom could be found by following it north. No one answers. The overseer's voice breaks the silence, and the moment passes like a ripple on the current. Night settles slowly over the river valley. Insects buzz along the banks, and the water glimmers faintly with the reflection of a crescent moon. The steamboats moor and extinguish their lamps. From a distance their chimneys rise like black towers against the stars. For now there is peace, a fragile peace that floats on the surface like driftwood. But somewhere, deep in the heart of the nation, the current has begun to pull in opposite directions. North and south, freedom and slavery, future and past. And though no one can hear it yet, the Mississippi already knows the sound of what's coming. Not the roar of battle, not yet, but the first soft tremor of division rolling quietly beneath its timeless song. Morning drifts across the river like breath across glass. The mist lifts slowly, revealing a world divided not by violence, but by uncertainty. Here, at the edges of the Mississippi, every current seems to carry a whisper, small, half-spoken questions about what comes next. At Cairo, where the Ohio meets the Mississippi, two flags already share the same sky. One belongs to the Union, the other to a dream that calls itself new. They hang limp in the still air, reflected in the brown water below, two colors bleeding together on the same mirrored surface. No one fires a shot, no one speaks, but everyone feels the difference. In small towns along the river's edge, life continues in cautious rhythm. Farmers mend fences, barges still carry grain and cattle. Yet in the taverns, the talk has changed. Men who once argued about weather and harvests now argue about states and sovereignty. The tone is hushed at first, as if the very trees might be listening. Then, little by little, it grows sharper, voices rising like wind before a storm. The Mississippi watches all of it with the same patient indifference. To the river, it makes no difference which flag flies, which songs are sung, which borders are drawn. Its only loyalty is to gravity, to the pull of the earth, to the endless downstream. And yet, it too begins to change. The ferries run less often. The boats carry fewer passengers and more soldiers. The laughter that once echoed from steamboat decks has faded into a cautious silence. In Memphis, the markets grow quieter. Cotton bales sit unclaimed, their owners uncertain which port will buy them now. Children still play by the levees, chasing each other between ropes and barrels, but their parents call them home earlier. Evening feels heavier than it did before, slower, as if the sun itself hesitates before setting. Across the river in Missouri, the tension feels different. There, neighbors have begun to look at one another not as friends, but as questions. In some places, churches split apart. Congregations divide by conscience. One hymn book opens to "My country, 'tis of thee," another to Dixie. The sound carries softly over the water, two melodies meeting somewhere in the middle, dissonant, haunting, beautiful in its sadness. The steamboat captains, once masters of this highway, now speak of risk. They study the flags painted on river forts, the uniforms posted along the banks. Every journey is a negotiation. Who controls this stretch? Who demands inspection? Who demands loyalty? The old language of trade has become a new language of allegiance. Still, there are moments of peace, those small, timeless intervals that belong only to the river. A heron stands motionless at dawn, its reflection perfect in the shallows. Fishermen lower their nets, as they always have, their movements slow and careful. The river smells of rain and mud and wood smoke. It's easy, for a moment, to believe that nothing has changed, but even the water carries signs. Rafts drift by with barrels marked munitions. Packets of letters float downriver, carried accidentally from abandoned boats. On calm nights, the current delivers them to distant banks, where strangers find them. Names of loved ones they'll never meet, promises made in ink and hope. Further south, near Natchez, plantations prepare for war in their own way. The overseers walk the fields with new urgency. Rumors spread among the enslaved. Some say the Union Army brings freedom, others say it brings fire. No one knows the truth, but all can feel that history has begun to move, slow and unstoppable, like the water itself. Evening returns, and with it the deep humming quiet that comes before sleep. A group of river workers sit by a fire on the bank, watching the reflection of the moon drift across the current. They speak in low tones, their words carrying just far enough to be lost in the night air. One man says that the river no longer feels friendly, that it divides what it once joined. Another shakes his head. "No," he murmurs, "the river's the same. It's us that changed." No one argues. The fire crackles. The conversation dissolves into the sound of crickets and water. By midnight, fog rolls in again, thick, silvery, and soundless. The outlines of the opposite shore fade into nothing. If you stand at the edge of the levee, you can't tell which side you're on. All you see is the water, endless and dark, whispering softly to itself. The river holds its silence. It has learned to carry many things, driftwood, boats, secrets, and now it carries a war that has not yet spoken its name. But soon it will. And when it does, the Mississippi will become the line no one can cross without changing what they are. The first ironclads appear not as monsters, but as shadows. From a distance, they look like low, dark barns drifting through the morning fog, shapes that hardly seem real until the mist parts, revealing the gleam of wet steel. They move slower than the current, their engines exhaling in deep, even breaths. Each puff of smoke folds gently into the air and vanishes. There are no cheers, no ceremony. The war has simply arrived upon the water. The people on the banks stop to watch. Farmers, ferrymen, washerwomen, all stand silent as the boats slide past. Children wave from muddy banks, uncertain whether these are guardians or ghosts. Even the birds seem to hold their wings still, watching the strange vessels drift south. A new kind of presence fills the air, mechanical, patient, inevitable. These floating fortresses are unlike anything the river has ever known. Their sides are plated in black iron, their decks crowded with cannon mouths that stare outward like unblinking eyes. When their engines thrum, the sound runs through the water itself, a low vibration that can be felt more than heard, like distant thunder beneath the skin of the world. Each one carries dozens of men who seldom see the sun. They live in narrow bunks below the deck, where lanterns swing on hooks, and the air smells of oil and damp iron. At dawn, they scrub the decks in silence. At dusk, they eat in silence again. Only at night, when the river grows still and the fog curls low, do they speak softly, voices floating up through the open hatches, stories from towns far away. One man hums a tune from Illinois. Another recalls the sound of his wife's piano. The echoes drift upward, swallowed by the night. Above them, the watchman leans on the rail and listens to the water slap softly against the hull. The Mississippi, once a free highway for all, now feels narrower. Every stretch is claimed, measured, patrolled. Towns that once traded freely now wait for permits and passwords. The steamboats that still run must carry documents, signatures, seals, the language of suspicion replacing the language of trust. On clear days, signal flags flash between banks. On others, only the echo of a whistle answers across the wide gray water. Further downriver at island number 10, a battle begins, but not the kind sung in songs. There are no charging lines or waving banners, only smoke, rain, and mud. The river itself is the battlefield, its currents both ally and enemy. Gunboats trade fire across the bends. Their cannon bursts muffled by the thick mist. The sound rolls for miles, startling cattle in far-off pastures, rattling shutters in sleeping towns. When the smoke clears, the water glitters again, indifferent, endless, reflecting a sky too pale to care. In nearby camps, soldiers wake early to the smell of coffee and river mud. They live half on land, half on water, never far from either. Their tents sag with humidity. Their boots are never dry. They spend their mornings repairing pontoons, their afternoons stacking barrels, their nights cleaning rifles under the weak light of lanterns. Every task is slow, deliberate, repeated, the rhythm of waiting, the rhythm of endurance. One young soldier from Ohio writes to his mother that the river sounds alive at night. He says it gurgles and whispers, calling out like a restless creature. He dreams of it often, a long coiling thing with 100 mouths, whispering secrets through the fog. He signs the letter with a smudge of soot, folds it carefully, and hands it to a courier bound upriver. The courier never reaches him again. Along the opposite bank, Confederate pickets build fires behind low embankments. They watch the glow of the Union gunboats from afar, tiny sparks drifting across the dark water. Some are boys barely older than 16, others are farmers who've traded plows for rifles. They whisper about the Yankee monsters, boats that breathe smoke and spit lightning. But the truth is quieter. Both sides are frightened by what they've built. Occasionally, during the long nights, the soldiers on opposite shores can hear one another. A cough, a snatch of laughter, the clink of a tin cup. Sometimes, when the fog is thick, they call out softly across the river, names of hometowns, fragments of songs. No one knows who speaks first. The voices carry, echo, fade. Then silence again, until morning breaks the spell and war returns. In the towns that cling to the river's edge, life bends around this new presence. Children count the gunboats as they pass. Women hang laundry and pretend not to stare. In the evenings, the streets empty early. Men close their shops and retreat indoors, listening to the distant hum of engines. The war is near enough to smell, gunpowder, iron, and sweat carried on the wind. But it still feels unreal, like a storm that refuses to break. Further south, the great port of New Orleans lives in uneasy calm. Merchants walk the docks, counting losses. Sailors mutter about blockade lines and missing ships. The wharves, once filled with laughter and fiddle tunes, now echo with the scrape of boots and the rattle of chains. The city still glitters, gas lamps reflected in wet cobblestones, but beneath the glow lies an anxiety that no one can name aloud. People smile politely, but their eyes glance toward the river more often than before. The Mississippi, in its own way, begins to divide time. There is before, when the river meant commerce, travel, song. And now there is after, when it means boundaries, control, and fear. Maps are redrawn not on paper, but on water. Each bend becomes a question, each crossing a risk. And yet, in the midst of this transformation, the natural world continues its ancient business. Fish rise, reeds sway, and the sky pours rain over both banks without preference. In the ironclad's dark cabins, the men try to sleep through the engine's heartbeat. Some dream of open fields, some of faces they cannot see anymore. The river outside murmurs its eternal story, one that pays no heed to human borders. The boat drifts, the ropes creak, the current tugs against the hull. A lantern swings, casting long shadows that seem to move even when everything else is still. One night, After a long silence, a Union lookout spots something upriver, a faint light, bobbing. It could be a signal, or a trap, or nothing at all. He raises his rifle but doesn't fire. Instead, he listens. There's only the sound of frogs, crickets, and water sighing against metal. He lowers his weapon and watches the light drift closer, a lantern tied to a log, set loose by someone unseen. It floats past harmlessly, a message from no one to no one, glowing like a tiny planet in the darkness. By dawn, the fog thickens again, erasing all traces of the night before. The ironclads keep moving, their black silhouettes cutting through the pale morning light. Behind them, the wake curls briefly and then disappears, as if the river itself refuses to remember. The soldiers on shore watch them vanish around the bend, where sound fades and sky meets water. To the men who live beside it, the Mississippi no longer feels like a friend. It has become a frontier, not between countries, but between moments in time. A line between what was and what must come. And still it flows onward, vast and indifferent, carrying both sides of the war in its endless embrace. Winter creeps down the Mississippi quietly. It does not rush, nor roar, nor announce itself with snowstorms. It arrives the way fatigue does, slowly, invisibly, until one morning the world simply feels heavier. The air grows still, the colors dull, and even the river seems to move with effort. Each ripple looks tired, each bend gray and distant beneath the overcast sky. The trees along the banks have shed their leaves, their bare branches claw faintly at the mist. Chill fog hovers low above the water, blurring the line between river and sky. When the sun appears, it looks pale and distracted, as though it has forgotten what warmth feels like. The mornings smell of cold iron and damp wood. Even the steamboat whistles sound slower now, their echoes fading into the empty hills. The men who serve upon the river learn quickly that winter is its own kind of enemy. The ironclads groan as the temperature drops. Metal contracts, decks frost over, ropes stiffen until they crack like brittle branches. Coal smoke hangs thick and low, clinging to everything. Below deck, lanterns burn dimly in the stale air. The walls sweat with condensation, dripping like slow rain. The sound of the engines never stops, a low mechanical heartbeat pulsing through the hull. Each day feels the same. Wake, eat, scrub, wait. The world outside remains gray, featureless, and eternal. When the soldiers step onto the deck, the river's breath coats their faces in mist. Their gloves are slick with frost, their coats never dry. They have begun to measure time not in days or battles, but in the distance between the next meal and the next letter from home. Letters are everything here. Each one is an anchor, a thread to a world that feels half-imagined. They arrive crumpled, water-stained, smelling faintly of candle wax and the hands that wrote them. The men read them again and again, even after the ink begins to fade. When a letter ends, they trace the last line with a finger, not for the words, but for the memory of touch. Some tuck them into breast pockets, close to the heart. Others burn them quietly at night, as if releasing their ghosts back into the smoke. Along the banks, the small towns grow quieter still. Windows are shuttered, docks empty, the markets bare. Those who can leave have left. Those who remain live by routine, chopping wood, mending nets, tending to the few boats that still move between the lines. The war has slowed everything to a whisper. A man could walk from Missouri to Mississippi and never hear another voice for miles. Sometimes the river freezes near the edges, not solid, just thin glass-like sheets that crack softly under the wind. The water beneath keeps flowing, unseen but unstoppable. Children from nearby farms venture out to throw stones at the ice, watching the ripples bloom outward in perfect circles. Their laughter drifts across the banks like a memory of better days. The soldiers who hear it don't know whether to smile or ache. In the camps along the river, men build crude shelters from driftwood and canvas. They huddle near fires that smoke more than they burn. The nights are long and damp. They tell stories to pass the time, stories of hunts, of girls back home, of small towns where nothing ever happened. When their voices fade, the river fills the silence with its soft, ceaseless murmur. One night, frost covers everything. The boats glitter like sculptures in the moonlight, every rope and rivet silvered. Even the cannon barrels glisten as if dusted with stars. A thin mist clings to the water, turning the whole river into a dream. Somewhere downstream, a dog barks once, then falls silent. The sound carries for miles, a single reminder that life still exists beyond the cold. Below deck, a sailor sits alone with a small harmonica. He plays quietly, no melody in particular, just notes that rise and fall with the rhythm of the water. The sound is soft enough that most men don't notice it at first. But those who do stop what they're doing, they listen. For a few moments, the river and the music blend together, two kinds of patience sharing the same breath. Further south, the war continues, though less visibly. Supplies move by barge, hidden beneath tarps. Couriers cross by ferry in the dead of night. Every journey carries risk. Gunboats patrol the larger bends, their searchlights sweeping across the dark water like restless ghosts. Sometimes a shot rings out, sharp, lonely, swallowed almost immediately by the fog. The river absorbs it all without comment. To the north, along the bluffs of Illinois, snow begins to fall. It drifts lazily through the smoke, settling on the rails and the shoulders of sentries. Within minutes, it melts, a brief grace before the next cold front. Men wrap scarves over their mouths and stand watch with hands pressed to their rifles for warmth. One of them writes in his diary that the snow reminds him of home. Another writes that he's forgotten what home feels like. In the stillness of winter, the Mississippi feels endless. The distances between places seem to stretch. A boat leaving at dawn might not reach the next port by nightfall, though it's only a few miles away. Time loses its shape. The war, once loud and certain, becomes a dull ache that hums beneath the surface of things, a wound the river carries but never shows. Occasionally the clouds part. When the sun touches the water, the whole landscape glows faintly gold. Steam rises from the decks, frost melts in thin rivulets, and for a moment the world looks almost gentle again. Men pause their work just to watch. They lean on rails, breathing in the thin warmth, saying nothing. For those few minutes the river seems to forgive them, but winter never forgets. The cold returns as soon as the light fades. Lanterns flicker on one by one, glowing like tiny embers scattered across the darkness. Somewhere upstream, a steamboat's whistle calls out, long, low, and mournful. The sound rolls down the river, fading until it becomes indistinguishable from the wind. By now, even the wildlife has changed. Geese fly lower, slower, closer to the water. Otters vanish into their burrows. Herons stand hunched and motionless near the reeds. Only the river keeps moving, constant, impartial, carrying everything it's been given, leaves, letters, ashes, rumors, hope. It asks for nothing. It remembers nothing. It simply flows. As February turns toward spring, the ice begins to break. The current quickens, sweeping away the last brittle sheets of frost. The sound is soft but profound. The quiet cracking of a season ending, of the river waking from its long, gray dream. Men watch from the decks as driftwood passes by, carried swiftly toward the Gulf. They don't speak of it, but they all feel it: relief, fear, anticipation. Winter has passed, but peace has not come with it. Night falls once more. The stars are hidden behind clouds. The harmonica plays again, the same uncertain tune, rising and fading, blending with the sound of the thawing river. The Mississippi moves a little faster now, carrying both memory and forgetfulness in equal measure. And somewhere, deep beneath the water's slow churn, history begins to stir again. It has waited long enough. The river narrows near Vicksburg. It bends like a slow question mark through the hills, curving around bluffs of red clay and tangled vines. In the morning, the mist clings to everything: trees, rooftops, cannon barrels, even the faint outlines of people waking in silence. You can hear the low moan of the current before you see it. The Mississippi is broad here, but its voice feels small, weary, and patient, as if it too is waiting for something to end. For months now, Vicksburg has been under siege. The Union fleet lies just beyond the bend, its dark hulls half concealed in fog, the steady pulse of engines like a distant heartbeat. On land, batteries line the ridges. In the town below, cellars and caves have become homes. Families live beneath the earth, sleeping on straw mats beside flickering candles. Outside, the world moves slowly, the same smoke, the same gray sky, the same dull echo of guns rolling through the valley. It's not a constant battle anymore, just a rhythm of waiting. The soldiers dig and watch, eat what they can, whisper to each other in the half-light. Sometimes they fire across the river, but most days the guns remain silent. The silence is worse than the noise. It hangs heavy over the water, pressing down like humidity before a storm. The Mississippi carries the evidence of the siege in small, unremarkable ways. Bits of driftwood charred black from explosions, pieces of rope, shards of broken barrels, and every now and then a single piece of paper, a letter, half burned, written in a hurried hand. They drift along the surface, spinning slowly before vanishing into the bends below. The river gathers everything and forgets nothing. At night, the city glows faintly beneath the hills. Candles burn low in cellars, and the smell of smoke and bread fills the tunnels. Outside, the frogs croak as they always have. A mother hums to a child, the tune soft and steady, though her voice trembles from hunger. In the distance, a shell falls somewhere unseen, and the earth shakes for a moment. Dust trickles from the ceiling like rain. Then all is still again. The people have learned to live underground. They carve their lives into the bluffs, kitchens, beds, and shelves hollowed out of clay. A child paints stars on the ceiling with a burnt stick, so he can sleep beneath something that looks like a sky. The mothers tell him that when the war ends, he will see the real ones again. He doesn't ask when that will be. No one asks anymore. Above the caves, the soldiers keep their watch. Their uniforms are stiff with sweat and dust. They move slowly, conserving energy, conserving hope. They've stopped speaking of victory or defeat. Now they speak only of time. How long the bread will last, how long the river will rise, how long before it all ends. The Mississippi is both prison and promise. It divides, isolates, defines. The gunboats that once patrolled it now drift lazily in the current, waiting for orders that rarely come. Their reflections ripple across the surface, steel and smoke distorted by the smallest breeze. From afar, they look peaceful, almost beautiful, like floating cathedrals of iron. But inside, men cough in the damp air, wiping condensation from the bulkheads, staring into the same gray water day after day. Sometimes, on still evenings, A soldier on one bank can hear voices from the other side. They carry faintly across the river. Laughter, music, an argument, or the sound of someone washing clothes. The river doesn't care which side they're on. It carries each sound equally, weaving them into its endless hum. The water makes no distinction between friend or foe, hunger or comfort, prayer or curse. It accepts everything without judgment and continues downstream. By midsummer, the air turns thick and heavy. Mosquitoes rise in clouds at dusk. The camps reek of smoke, sweat, and damp gunpowder. Men drink from canteens that taste of rust. They write in their journals that the world feels smaller now, their lives reduced to a circle of mud, water, and sky. One Union soldier writes, "Every night the river glows red in the sunset, and I wonder if it knows what we've done to it." The people in the city begin to eat whatever they can find. Dogs vanish, rats become food, women grind corn meant for mules, children chew on scraps of leather to keep their jaws moving, to trick their stomachs into patience. They've stopped counting the days. They mark time instead by the number of candles left, the number of shells that fall between dawn and dusk. Yet even here, life refuses to disappear entirely. Someone still plays a violin at night, the sound faint but determined. The melody drifts through the air, fragile as spider silk, climbing above the smoke. It mingles with the sound of the river, turning sorrow into something like grace. Even the soldiers pause to listen. For a moment, it feels as if time itself has stopped to breathe. Then, one morning, after 47 days, the guns fall silent. No one cheers, no one speaks. The silence feels heavier than the noise that came before it. From the hills, smoke still drifts upward, white and harmless now. The flags begin to change, one lowered, one raised, both moving slowly, reluctantly, as though the air itself resists. The Mississippi reflects the moment perfectly. Two colors mirrored side by side, each trembling slightly on the water's skin. By afternoon, Union soldiers march quietly into the city. They do not sing. They do not celebrate. They move as though stepping through someone else's dream. The streets are lined with people who have nothing left to give, thin, pale, eyes hollow from weeks of waiting. The soldiers offer bread, water, words of comfort that sound strange even to their own ears. The people take them in silence. Gratitude has become too costly to afford. Down at the docks, the river moves faster, as if relieved. Supply boats unload crates of food and medicine. The sound of wood on wood, rope on post, men shouting orders, life returning carefully, uncertainly. The smell of the water is sharp and clean, carrying the scent of rain from upriver. The air feels lighter, though no one dares to call it peace. That night, the sky clears for the first time in weeks. The stars are faint but visible, shimmering above the quiet hills. People emerge from their caves to see them. Some weep, some simply stand still, staring upward. The river glows beneath the moon, silver and forgiving. Its surface is smooth again, as though it has chosen to forget everything it has witnessed. But the land remembers. The hills are scarred with trenches, the houses with holes, the people with hunger. The river runs past it all, indifferent, eternal, humming its low, familiar song. In the morning it will carry debris and memory alike down to the delta. Fragments of wood, scraps of paper, and perhaps the faint echo of that violin still playing somewhere beyond hearing. From this moment on, the Mississippi belongs entirely to the Union. The war has been divided in two, before Vicksburg and after. Yet for all its strategic weight, the river itself feels unchanged. It continues its slow course to the Gulf, unbothered by banners or borders, washing clean the edges of a nation that has bled into its waters. At sunrise, a Union officer stands at the edge of the bluffs and watches the light crawl across the water. He writes a single line in his notebook, "The river runs free again." Then he closes it, tucks it into his coat, and walks away. The words will fade, the ink will run, and the notebook will one day be lost. But the river will remember the sentiment in its own quiet way. The Mississippi flows on. It has outlasted the siege, the soldiers, the songs, and the sorrow. It glides through the wreckage of war as if nothing has happened, reflecting only what the light chooses to give it. Its current carries north and south alike, victors, victims, dreams, and ashes, all blended into one wide, unending tide. And as it passes the silent hills of Vicksburg, it seems, for a brief moment, to pause, just long enough to catch the reflection of a new dawn before slipping forward once more into history's endless calm. The river runs freely now. For the first time in years, its waters move without interruption. No batteries on the bluffs, no ironclads blocking the bends, no fear in every crossing. The current feels different, lighter, as if it too has been waiting for permission to breathe. From the north, steamboats return to the water, their tall stacks exhaling thin gray smoke that folds gently into the morning mist. They travel southward like pilgrims, rediscovering a world that had gone silent. The people who live along the Mississippi begin to emerge again. Fishermen return to the docks, their boats repaired from old planks and rope. Children wander down to the levees, watching the reflections of the clouds drift across the muddy surface. There is laughter again, hesitant, uncertain, but real. For a long time, no one dares to speak of victory or defeat. They simply speak of weather, crops, the color of the sky. Simple things, safe things. The river carries everything downstream: logs, ash, wreckage, seeds, and whispers of news from upriver. Each town learns from the next what has changed, what still endures, what cannot yet be spoken aloud. It is summer now, and the air is heavy with humidity. The days begin early and end late, the sky turning gold and violet over the horizon. The Mississippi gleams beneath it all, wide and unhurried, as if its patience has finally been rewarded. But the water has changed too. It carries a new burden, the memory of division, the residue of conflict. Along its edges, the wrecks of boats lie half buried in silt. Cannonballs rest beneath the shallows, wrapped in reeds. And yet life begins to grow around them: moss, lilies, dragonflies. The river wastes nothing. Even ruin becomes part of its design. At dawn, the sound of the steamboat whistle returns, long, low, and mournful, but no longer a signal of war. People wake to it the way they once did years before, when peace was an ordinary thing. They stand by their windows and watch as the boats glide past, white spray rising from the paddle wheels. The smell of smoke and wet wood drifts through the air, familiar and strange all at once. Some wave. Others simply watch in silence, unsure what to feel. In the larger towns, Memphis, Natchez, Baton Rouge, trade stirs again. Warehouses reopen, their doors creaking like old memories. Stacks of cotton reappear on the docks, though fewer than before. Merchants speak in cautious tones, counting not only money but trust. They measure how much has been lost and how much might yet be rebuilt. Even in commerce, grief has a way of lingering between transactions. Union soldiers now patrol the river openly, though their presence feels less like control and more like gravity, constant, unseen, accepted. They walk the decks with quiet discipline, keeping watch over water that no longer resists them. They are not Conquerors now, just caretakers of an uneasy peace. Some are veterans of Vicksburg or Shiloh, their eyes hollow with memory. They lean on the rails and look at the passing banks, wondering if they will ever feel at home again. In one such regiment, a young soldier from Iowa sketches the river each morning. He draws with charcoal on scraps of old paper the curve of a bend, the reflection of trees, the pale sky above the water. He does not draw the war. He draws what remains. When asked why, he says softly, "Because it's the only part that doesn't lie." He mails the drawings home to his sister, who keeps them in a box by her window. Years later, when the paper yellows and the ink fades, the river will still look the same. Further downstream, life begins to take on a rhythm again. Farmers plow the fields where fortifications once stood. The soil is rich with ash and metal, but crops still grow. Children chase each other between rows of corn, their laughter rising above the hum of insects. At night, the air fills with the sound of frogs and crickets, and the river glows faintly under starlight. The land seems to exhale at last, but not everyone finds peace in the current. The war has left too many ghosts to forget. At river crossings, burned ferries lie in ruin. Old uniforms wash up on the banks, buttons glinting faintly in the mud. Every bend hides a story that no one tells aloud. For some, the river's freedom feels like betrayal, a reminder that time keeps moving even when hearts do not. A preacher in a small town near Port Gibson gives a sermon beside the water. He speaks of forgiveness, though his voice trembles when he says the word. Behind him, the river slides past, unbothered, reflecting both sunlight and shadow. When he finishes, no one claps. The congregation disperses quietly, their footsteps soft in the dust. The preacher remains, staring at his reflection. It ripples once, then disappears. There are freedmen now along the banks, families who follow the water southward, searching for relatives, for work, for a place that might still offer dignity. They travel in small groups, walking along the levees with bundles on their backs. Children ride on shoulders, old men use walking sticks cut from driftwood. Sometimes they find passage on passing steamboats, working for food or a corner of deck to sleep on. The river carries them as it has carried everything else, without judgment, without question. For many, it is the first road they have ever traveled freely. At night, the sound of their voices floats across the current, soft hymns, songs of freedom, prayers whispered into the open sky. The words blend with the river's endless murmur until they are indistinguishable, one long hymn of water and hope. Fires glow along the banks, small constellations against the dark. In the morning, the smoke rises straight into the still air, unhurried, unafraid. The Union Navy remains, but even the officers know their purpose is changing. The gunboats, once engines of destruction, now serve as ferries, transports, guardians of trade. The men aboard them grow quieter, more introspective. They watch herons skim across the surface where cannon fire once flashed. They polish the same brass instruments that once directed battle, now only reflecting sunlight and the faces of weary men. War has turned into maintenance, into memory. By late summer, the Mississippi takes on its old rhythm again, the slow pulse of life between its banks. Commerce returns, but so does reflection. Every town along its length bears scars, walls pocked with holes, docks rebuilt from salvaged boards, fields where markers stand instead of fences. And yet every scar softens beneath the weight of time and water. The river smooths everything eventually. A traveler from New Orleans writes that the Mississippi looks peaceful now, but it carries ghosts. He describes the water as darker than before, not in color, but in spirit. He says you can almost hear the echoes if you listen long enough, the rumble of distant cannons, the cries of men lost in the fog. But he also writes that the river smells like life again, like soil, rain, and wood smoke, the scent of things growing after being burned. Autumn arrives gently. The leaves along the bluffs turn amber and gold, falling one by one into the water. They spin for a moment, then vanish downstream. The days shorten, but the sunsets linger, long glowing stretches of color that stain the sky before fading into twilight. From the decks of passing boats, men watch quietly, hats in hand, unsure whether they're mourning or healing. Perhaps both. At a dock near Baton Rouge, two old ferrymen talk as they mend a rope. One says the river feels the same as it always did. The other shakes his head and says, "No, it feels like it remembers." They both stop working and watch the current for a while, waiting for it to answer. It doesn't. It just keeps moving, soft and constant, toward the sea. The war still rages elsewhere, in forests, fields, and rail yards, but here on the river, time feels suspended. The Mississippi carries supplies for one side and hope for the other. It carries news, rumors, dreams, and dust. It unites what the land continues to divide, and through it all, its voice remains the same, a steady hum beneath the noise of human history. At dusk, the water turns to glass. The sky reflects perfectly on its surface, clouds and stars mingling until the horizon disappears. Somewhere downstream, the first lights of New Orleans flicker faintly, golden against the dark. Between them lies everything that has happened, all the lives touched by this river, all the things it has carried and buried. The Mississippi drifts onward, wide and unending, as if carrying the soul of a nation still learning how to be whole again. The river has always been a road, long before. Borders and battle lines, before names and nations, it carved its own path south, a natural corridor of movement and change. Now, in the fading years of the war, it becomes something more than a route of trade or conquest. It becomes a road to freedom. You can see it in the mornings when the mist still hugs the banks. Small groups of people walk quietly along the levees, wrapped in blankets and rags, their footsteps muffled in the damp soil. They travel by instinct more than map, following the current, trusting that somewhere ahead the water leads toward something better. Many have no clear destination. They simply move because standing still feels too much like captivity. The Mississippi knows these journeys. It carries the sound of whispered prayers, the rhythm of oars, the faint splash of footsteps in the shallows. By daylight, the travelers hide among the trees or rest in abandoned huts. By night, they follow the moon, its pale light gleaming on the water like a thread of silver leading them onward. The river offers both concealment and direction, a vast, breathing ally that speaks without words. The Union lines stretch now from Cairo to New Orleans. Along this watery highway, new communities begin to appear, clusters of tents, wooden huts, and makeshift chapels rising near the banks. They are called contraband camps at first, though no one likes the name. Freedom should never sound like property. Inside these camps, life is fragile but fierce, families reunited, children laughing, women teaching each other letters by firelight. Every morning begins with the same ritual, washing clothes in the river, singing as they work, the songs carrying far across the calm surface. One soldier writes that he can hear them even from the opposite shore. The voices rise and fall with the current, deep, steady, like the hum of the earth itself. He says it sounds like a hymn being sung not to God, but to the river. He stands at his post, listening until dawn, unable to sleep. Perhaps, he writes, they are baptizing the land that enslaved them. Steamboats begin to ferry the freed people southward, carrying them toward places where work and safety might exist. On deck, men and women stand shoulder to shoulder, clutching children and bundles of clothes. They watch the banks slide past, forests, ruined mansions, fields lying fallow. Each bend feels like both departure and arrival. Some cry softly, some smile, some simply stare at the water, unsure how to feel when the world itself feels new. At night, the decks grow quiet. Lanterns sway from iron hooks, casting golden halos in the mist. The passengers sit together in silence, listening to the paddle wheel's steady rhythm, a heartbeat of progress. The river glows faintly beneath them, reflecting the stars. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, someone begins to hum. The sound blends with the motion of the boat, turning into something halfway between a poem, lullaby, and a prayer. Further north, a group of freedmen build a small chapel from driftwood and salvaged boards. They raise it on a bluff overlooking the water, so the river becomes their horizon. Every Sunday they gather inside, men in patched coats, women in faded dresses, children sitting cross-legged on the floor. They sing without instruments, their voices rising like a tide. Freedom, it turns out, is quieter than anyone imagined. It does not arrive with fanfare or trumpets. It seeps into life slowly, like light through fog. For some, it tastes like fear, the fear of not knowing where to go next or what comes after survival. For others, it feels like weightlessness, the sudden absence of command, the rediscovery of one's own name. And for all, it carries the same strange melody, the sound of the river, whispering of endless movement and possibility. Not everyone welcomes this new tide. Along certain banks, men gather in the shadows, bitter and silent. They watch the steamboats pass and mutter about the world being turned upside down. They cannot see that the world was already upside down, that the river has only now begun to set it right. But the water pays them no mind. It glides past, patient as ever, eroding old hatreds grain by grain. As summer deepens, more families arrive. Some come from plantations now deserted, others from towns caught between armies. They follow the paths of rumor. The river is safe, people say. The river will take you home. So they come, barefoot and sunburned, carrying what little they have. They build rafts, patch old canoes, find passage where they can. The Mississippi becomes a living map of their movement, dotted with fires at night, songs by day, footprints pressed into soft mud. Children learn the river first. They know where the current is strong, where the fish gather, where the water runs shallow and warm. They skip stones and watch them vanish into the flow. They name the boats that pass: Morning Star, Magnolia, Freedom Bell. To them, the war feels like an old story already fading, something the adults speak of in quiet tones. Their world is the one the river makes new each day. Further south, at Baton Rouge and Port Hudson, new settlements take root. Schools open inside old warehouses. Soldiers help build houses from the timber of dismantled gunboats. The same ships that once carried death now carry lumber, tools, and seed. It feels almost like redemption, the transformation of purpose from destruction to creation. Each hammer blow on wood sounds like a heartbeat returning to a body long asleep. One evening, a Union officer walks the riverbank and watches the sunset. He sees freed families washing clothes, soldiers stacking crates, children chasing each other through the grass. When he closes his book, the sky is red and gold, and the water mirrors it perfectly, a single, endless reflection of renewal. By autumn, the current grows faster with rain. The trees along the banks begin to turn, their leaves spinning down like sparks. The camps expand. Small gardens appear beside huts. Corn grows where shells once fell. Men fish from rafts made of barrels. Women dry laundry on branches, white cloths fluttering like flags of surrender and hope. At dusk, the air smells of smoke, river mud, and something else. Something lighter, like the scent of tomorrow. But even in freedom, the Mississippi demands respect. Storms rise suddenly, turning calm water into dark chaos. Boats capsize, rafts break apart. When that happens, the survivors cling to one another, waiting for dawn. The river tests those who trust it, reminding them that liberty, too, is fragile. Yet each time they rebuild. They find new driftwood, new courage, new faith in the flow that carries them forward. In New Orleans, the docks are alive again. Markets bustle, bells ring, languages mix. English, French, Creole, songs from Africa, and the islands blending into a single rhythm. The Mississippi empties itself into the Gulf here, but it never truly ends. Its waters mingle with the sea, spreading the stories it has carried from thousands of miles away. Freedom, like the river, has no borders. At night, from the levees, you can see the ships anchored in the delta, their lights scattered like stars across the horizon. Between them, the dark water moves quietly, endless and full of memory. A breeze stirs the reeds. Somewhere far upriver, a whistle sounds, faint, mournful, eternal. The war is not over, but something deeper has begun to heal. For centuries, the Mississippi has been a mirror of the nation beside it, reflecting its divisions, its dreams, its capacity for both cruelty and grace. Now, for the first time in generations, the reflection is changing. The river still carries scars, rusted anchors, sunken boats, bones buried beneath silt, but its surface gleams brighter each morning. It holds within it the promise that what has been broken can still flow, that what has been wounded can still move toward light. And as the night deepens, the river sings its low, eternal song. It is the same song it has always sung, of movement, of patience, of life continuing. But now, beneath the old melody, there is something new. A harmony of voices rising softly from its banks, voices that once spoke in whispers now sing freely to the open sky. Their echoes travel far downstream, mingling with the wind and the waves, until even the sea seems to hum along. Freedom has found its current, and the Mississippi, timeless, tireless, infinite, carries it home. When the guns finally fall silent, the towns along the Mississippi do not cheer. They simply exhale. The sound of relief is soft, a creak of wood, a closing of shutters, a sigh carried on the wind. What remains is a landscape of endurance, houses half rebuilt, gardens overgrown, docks that lean unevenly toward the water. The river moves beside them, unchanged and unhurried, brushing past the ruins with a gentleness that feels almost human. Morning light returns cautiously. It filters through the broken windows of warehouses and across streets lined with puddles that reflect the pale sky. Smoke rises from the chimneys again, thin and uncertain, as if testing the air. The towns smell of ash and damp earth, of rope and tar and bread beginning to bake again. Somewhere a bell rings, not for warning, not for mourning, just to remind the day that it has begun. Life resumes in fragments. Farmers walk to the fields with tools repaired from scraps of metal. Women sweep porches that survived the shelling. Children gather river stones, smooth and gray, arranging them in lines that lead nowhere in particular. Every movement feels deliberate, as though time itself must be coaxed back into motion. The pace of existence settles to match the current. Steady, deliberate, slow. The river is wide here, almost languid, Its surface holds a sheen of sunlight that ripples whenever the wind changes. From a distance it looks peaceful, but beneath the surface drift the remnants of everything that came before: planks, rope, shattered hulls, fragments of bridges. The Mississippi carries them southward with the same patience it carries leaves in spring. Nothing is hurried, nothing is wasted. Along the banks, nature begins its quiet reclamation. Vines climb over abandoned cannons. Moss softens the stone of old fort walls. Grass fills the footprints of soldiers and the tracks of wagons. Wildflowers bloom where tents once stood, their petals bright against the muted soil. The living world does not pause to debate history. It simply grows wherever it can. In the towns, commerce returns slowly. Empty warehouses echo with the shuffle of footsteps and the scrape of crates being moved once more. The sound of a hammer striking a nail drifts across the water, followed by the rhythmic creak of oars. Barges carry grain again, then lumber, then hope disguised as ordinary cargo. The docks smell of pine and sweat and river silt. Each scent is a promise that something like normal life is still possible. The seasons turn with quiet certainty. Spring brings swollen waters that rise almost to the steps of houses. Summer paints the air with humidity and the buzzing of insects. Autumn scatters yellow leaves across the decks of idle boats. Winter mutes everything beneath a soft gray light. The people learn to measure time not by battles or proclamations, but by the level of the river against the pilings. Church steeples that once marked division now serve only as landmarks for navigation. Schools reopen in borrowed rooms. The lessons begin with the simplest subjects: numbers, letters, the names of the months that were lost to war. Children learn quickly. They have not forgotten how to listen. They draw pictures of the river in chalk on slate boards, long blue lines curving across dark surfaces. Their teachers leave the drawings there overnight, unwilling to erase them. In the evenings, the river mirrors the sky in long strokes of gold and indigo. Smoke from cook fires drifts over the water, mingling with the low haze of the horizon. From the higher bluffs, the lights of neighboring towns appear as faint constellations. Each flicker represents a hearth, a family, a life continuing. Seen from above, it is as if the river itself has become a chain of quiet stars flowing toward the sea. The scars of war remain, but they fade under layers of time. Cannon pits fill with rainwater and become ponds where herons stand. Earthen mounds crumble into gentle slopes covered in grass. Wooden fences are rebuilt without urgency. Some are never replaced at all. People learn to step around what cannot be repaired, to live beside reminders rather than erase them. Even memory begins to soften, its edges blurred by repetition and forgetting. Mail boats travel the river again, their hulls bright with new paint. They bring letters wrapped in oilcloth, bound with string. Most contain little more than greetings and weather, but that is enough. Words themselves feel like reconstruction, bridges of language built across silence. When the boats depart, their wakes fold slowly back into the river until the surface is smooth once more. Animals return to the towns as if summoned. Dogs wander through marketplaces. Cats curl in the shade of barrels. Horses drink from troughs beside water wheels that creak steadily through the heat. Birds nest in the rafters of churches and warehouses, weaving straw among the splintered beams. Their calls echo against the brick walls, filling the hollow spaces where human voices have yet to return. At midday, the light is harsh and bright, flattening the world into shapes of gold and shadow. The river seems almost white under the glare, its reflections too strong to look at directly. Everything shimmers, the rooftops, the water, the wings of insects drifting above the reeds. Then clouds gather, The light softens and color returns to the world in muted tones. Rust, green, ochre, silver. The rhythm of these changes feels like breathing. From the upper windows of houses, people watch the flow. They have grown accustomed to seeing it without expectation. The river is no longer an enemy line or a highway of invasion. It is simply itself again, a vast moving mirror that asks nothing, offers nothing, and endures everything. Its constancy is a kind of comfort. To look at it is to remember that time still exists beyond human ambition. The fields beyond the towns yield crops once more. Corn rises tall where trenches once scarred the ground. The soil, enriched by ash and decay, produces abundantly. Harvest wagons roll through streets still pocked with shell marks. The contrast is almost gentle. Destruction feeding renewal, loss becoming sustenance. The people accept this without surprise. The land has always known how to recover before they did. When rain falls, it falls softly. It pools in wagon ruts and along rooftops, collecting in rain barrels that overflow into gutters. The smell of wet wood and soil fills the air. The river swells, but never floods, content to absorb what the clouds deliver. Each drop seems to rinse a little more of the past away, carrying it quietly downstream. Night brings its own restoration. The towns grow still, their lamps glowing behind curtains, their streets lit only by moonlight and the pale sheen of the river. Crickets pulse in the darkness, frogs answer from the banks. The sound is neither loud nor quiet. It simply exists, as constant as the current itself. Smoke from 1,000 small fires drifts upward until it disappears into the stars. Those who cannot sleep often stand at their doorways and watch the water. They see their reflections stretched thin by the ripples. They see the lights of other towns across the river and feel less alone. There is no need for words, no audience for thought, only the slow passage of time measured by the steady movement of the current. The river has become a clock without hands, marking the hours through sound and motion. Seasons pass. The scars of war continue to fade beneath layers of routine and vegetation. Children grow, houses are rebuilt, fields expand, and trade resumes. The Mississippi remains, patient and immense, holding the memory of it all within its depths. It carries the silt of 1,000 small recoveries, blending them into a single color that gleams beneath the sunlight. From above, the river valley looks whole again. The line of water winds through forests and farms, through cities reborn and villages still dreaming. Its surface reflects clouds that change shape by the minute, a living map of the sky. Everything moves, everything heals, everything returns. And when night comes once more, the river lies calm beneath the stars, as if resting after a long, unbroken vigil. It has watched the birth of hope and the collapse of certainty. It has carried freedom, sorrow, and ash in the same tide. Now it carries only time, a quiet procession of days drifting toward the sea. And the towns beside it, those small lanterns of endurance, watch in silence, content to let the river keep their secrets. Years pass, and the river remains. The war becomes a memory spoken in lowered voices, then a story, then a shadow behind the present. The Mississippi flows through it all, carrying fragments of a time most would rather forget. It does not mourn or celebrate. It simply endures, polishing the rough edges of history until they dissolve into the current. The scars fade first from sight. Where trenches once carved through the hills, wild grasses now sway in the wind. Cannonballs buried in the banks are swallowed by roots. The wooden hulks of sunken boats sink deeper into the mud, their shapes softened by silt and moss. In spring, the reeds grow taller, erasing the outlines of fortifications. By summer, only the faint rise and fall of the land hints at what once stood there. Nature forgets in its own patient way. The animals return before the people do. Deer wade into the shallows at dusk, their reflections rippling beneath the orange light. Otters slip through reeds, leaving narrow trails of bubbles. Egrets stand motionless in the backwaters, their white feathers bright against the dark surface. At dawn, the air fills with the layered sounds of wings, insects, and water, the slow rebuilding of an ecosystem that never asked for war, but endured it nonetheless. Each sound feels like an exhale the land had been holding for years. The riverbanks grow soft again. Moss clings to driftwood, and clusters of lilies bloom near the rocks. The mud smells rich, alive, and familiar. When storms come, they wash away more of the past, carrying pieces of forgotten iron and splintered wood downstream, burying them in new sediment. The Mississippi has become its own archive, layering years atop one another in silence. Each flood erases, and each drought reveals, but the story it tells remains wordless. Farmers plow the ground without knowing what lies beneath it. Their fields are fertile from the ashes of conflict, the soil darkened by the remnants of camps and gunpowder. Corn rises where regiments once stood in line. Cotton sways gently in the breeze, its white tufts catching sunlight like fragments of cloud. Every harvest pulls something ancient from the earth. A coin, a button, a buckle, small relics of the restless years. They are gathered without ceremony and set aside in boxes, then forgotten again. The river towns change with the seasons. Wooden piers are rebuilt, warehouses repainted, streets widened. The scars of battle turn into foundations for new buildings. The walls of a burned church become the base of a grain mill. What was broken is reused. What was lost is replaced. The rhythm of commerce replaces the rhythm of cannon fire. The sound of hammer and saw now fills the air where once there was only silence and wind. Time slows near the water. Afternoons stretch long, the light bending lazily across the current. Fishermen sit on overturned barrels, lines cast into the shallows, their hats pulled low against the sun. Smoke from their pipes rises in thin columns that dissolve before reaching the treetops. The sound of the river surrounds everything, a constant murmur that never stops, never grows louder, never fades entirely. It becomes background to every life lived beside it. When the wind shifts, the river smells of silt and grass and faint salt from the faraway Gulf. At night, it smells of rain before the clouds arrive. It carries the scent of everything it touches: pine from the north, clay from the bluffs, magnolia from the south. To breathe here is to inhale the geography of half a continent. Each gust feels older than language, and older still than the nations built upon its shores. The people who live along the river learn not to speak of the past directly. They sense it in the weather instead. On still mornings, the fog that rises from the water feels heavier, as if thickened by memory. On stormy nights, the thunder seems to echo the deep sound of cannons long gone. Yet life continues without interruption. Markets open, ferries cross, children chase one another along the levees. The world has returned to the business of living. Somewhere beneath the water, the remnants of ships still rest, wood dissolving, metal rusting into dust. Fish swim through the open ribs of hulls once manned by men who dreamed of glory. The river makes no distinction between steel and bone, between weapon and rock. It accepts everything equally, shaping it into its own design. In this quiet process of decay, there is a kind of grace, destruction made gentle by the patience of time. By the 10th year after the war, the river looks new again, No smoke, no banners, no patrols, just an endless sweep of brown and blue water moving toward the Gulf. Travelers describe it as peaceful, though they still sense a certain gravity in its presence, the way one might feel in a cathedral or a graveyard. The Mississippi carries a stillness that invites reflection even from those who do not know what it remembers. The forests along its banks grow dense. Cypress knees rise from the shallows like fingers reaching toward the sky. Spanish moss hangs in long curtains that sway in the breeze. The light filters through them in fractured gold, turning the air into something that feels half liquid, half dream. Frogs croak from hidden places, their rhythm slow and deliberate. Turtles bask on fallen logs until clouds pass and shadows cool their shells. Every motion seems designed to remind the world that peace, once given time, can resemble beauty again. Seasons fold into each other. Winters are mild, springs come early. The river floods, withdraws, floods again, its breathing as regular as the beating of a heart. When the water rises high enough, it covers the old paths completely. Sometimes a storm will uncover a piece of the past, the tip of a rusted anchor, a row of wooden stakes, a stretch of stone that once marked a fort's edge. They appear, glimmer briefly in the light, then vanish once more beneath the current. The Mississippi prefers to keep its secrets. By the 20th year, children born after the war have children of their own. They know the river only as it is, not as it was. To them, its silence is ordinary, its vastness familiar. They grow up swimming in the same water that once carried wreckage and despair. They build houses on the same ground where soldiers once dug trenches. They inherit peace without knowing the cost of it, and in that unknowing, something healing takes root. From the bluffs above Natchez, the view stretches for miles. Green forests, silver water, and sky so wide it swallows thought. In the late afternoon, the light turns amber, washing everything in warmth. The river catches it perfectly, turning into a ribbon of fire that snakes through the landscape. Then the sun dips lower and the glow fades into dusk. For a moment, the line between water and sky disappears completely. It is impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. Night follows gently. Lanterns flicker on houseboats moored along the shore. Fireflies drift through the reeds, their lights blinking like patient signals from another world. The air hums with crickets and the faint movement of wings. The moon rises, large, pale, mirrored twice in the water below. The Mississippi becomes a single sheet of light, stretching endlessly south. It looks eternal. The river does not speak of forgiveness, but it practices it through motion. Every second it touches new ground, erasing the traces of what came before. It smooths the banks, turns rubble into sand, makes all things level again. The process is so slow that no one notices. Only when decades pass does the transformation become clear. The past reshaped, the pain absorbed, the story retold without bitterness. In time, even the maps change. New towns appear, new bends are cut, old ones filled. The river is never exactly where it was before. It moves like memory, flexible, persistent, refusing to remain fixed. Each shift leaves behind a ghost of its former course, a pale crescent of Oxbow Lake glimmering in the grass. To stand beside one of these abandoned bends is to look at a memory fossilized in water. The Mississippi continues toward the Gulf, unbothered by the weight of centuries. It will carry the same mud that once soaked the fields of battle all the way to the ocean floor. There it will settle, layer upon layer, mixing with the dust of mountains and the bones of tiny sea creatures. In 1,000 years, it will become part of something else. Stone, perhaps, or soil, or simply the deep unknown. The The river is not concerned with what it becomes. Its only purpose is to move. And so it moves, through seasons and generations, through silence and renewal. Its song is endless but never loud, constant but never still. It is the same voice that once murmured beside soldiers and mothers, beside children who dreamed of peace and those who feared it would never come. Now it murmurs beside farmers and travelers and those who no longer remember why they feel at ease in its presence. The comfort lies in constancy, the knowledge that something in this world refuses to break. When dawn returns, the first light spills over the horizon and paints the surface gold. Mist rises from the water, blurring its edges. The river looks weightless again, as if suspended between earth and sky. Birds lift from the trees, circling once, before gliding downstream. The world is new, but the river is older than all renewal. It continues without beginning or end through the history it has both witnessed and washed away. And on its quiet banks, the land sleeps peacefully once more. There comes a point when history no longer feels like the past. It settles into the landscape, into the breath of places, into the rhythm of familiar sounds. The Mississippi has reached that point. Its water moves as it always has, but the stories it carries have softened, their sharp edges dissolved into time. What was once war is now sediment. What was once division is now reflection. The river is not concerned with remembrance, yet everything along its banks remembers in its own quiet way. Old trees lean toward the water as if listening. Rusted anchors sleep beneath layers of sand. The outlines of vanished ports are drawn in the faint lines of wild grass. No monuments stand here, no grand markers of victory or loss. Only the steady presence of motion, the river's long memory expressed in the language of flow. In the towns, people live ordinary lives that depend on extraordinary endurance. They wake to the sound of the water, they work by its rhythm, they sleep beneath its breath. The river governs their hours without command or decree. Its constancy gives shape to time. Markets open with the morning light. Church bells ring where cannon fire once echoed. Ferries cross where gunboats once prowled. Each small act carries the weight of continuity. To live beside the Mississippi is to accept that time moves forward only because water does. When fog gathers, it blurs the distinction between past and present. From the levees, the world looks suspended. A faint line of trees, the shimmer of wet light, the ghost of a reflection. Sometimes it feels as though the war still drifts there, hidden just beneath the mist, waiting to be remembered. Then the sun rises higher, the fog dissolves, and the surface returns to calm. The moment passes, but its impression lingers like the shadow of a thought. The river does not keep memory, it performs it. Every ripple is a repetition of something that came before. A fragment of rain from another century, a trace of ash, a single grain of soil carried from one age to the next. In this way, it embodies continuity without permanence. What was once human becomes mineral, then water, then movement. Each second is both end and beginning. Nothing stays, yet nothing truly leaves. In the highlands of the north, snow melts each spring and begins the long descent. Streams gather in forests, join creeks, and find one another in widening channels until they merge into the great river. Every drop that falls from those distant places carries a memory of rain on pine needles, of wind over fields, of silence between mountains. By the time it reaches the delta, it has become part of a single vast story, the history of a continent told without words. It is this silent inheritance that the Mississippi delivers endlessly to the sea. From The air, the river, looks eternal. It curves and coils across the land like a signature written by the planet itself. Every bend, every oxbow, every glimmer of reflected light is a moment captured in motion. Viewed from above, the towns are small, the fields orderly, the water immense. It is easy to forget that this same river once divided a nation. Now it connects it, quietly, invisibly, with every turn. The seasons turn without effort. In spring, the banks glow green, alive with the return of birds and insects. In summer, the air thickens, the light grows heavy. The river's surface darkens to bronze. Autumn scatters gold across the hills and paints the current with drifting leaves. Winter brings fog and silence, the soft hush of water beneath a colorless sky. Each season folds into the next as the river carries its reflection downstream. Nothing interrupts the cycle, nothing hastens it. At dusk, the river becomes glass. The wind drops, the air stills, and the entire sky settles into the water. It is here, in this hour between light and dark, that memory feels closest. The line between now and then vanishes. The water mirrors what once was and what still is. The past superimposed upon the present in perfect stillness. The illusion lasts only a moment, but the peace it offers endures long after the light fades. Beyond the last town, where the land flattens and the soil turns to marsh, the river begins to lose itself. Its current slows, its color deepens. The reeds grow thick. The air tastes faintly of salt. Here, the Mississippi relinquishes its identity. It divides into channels, each one moving toward the same vast horizon. There is no border between river and sea, only the gradual merging of fresh water and tide, memory and forgetting. The surface gleams under the wide southern sky, a single mirror stretching to infinity. Pelicans glide low across the delta, their wings carving shadows into the light. The sound of the water mingles with the distant hum of waves. At the edge of the continent, the river ends as quietly as it began. No ceremony marks its arrival. The Gulf accepts it without question, blending its silt and stories into the endless expanse of blue. In this meeting of waters, history finds its truest form. Not a line, but a cycle, not an ending, but continuation. Far upstream, life continues unremarkably. Children run along the banks, their laughter echoing across the shallows. Farmers mend fences, merchants load barges, fishermen cast lines from the same wooden piers, rebuilt again and again. The rhythm of work, the hum of insects, the distant call of birds, all weave together into a harmony so constant it becomes invisible. Generations pass, and still the river moves with the same deliberate grace. It asks for nothing more than space to exist. The land remembers, even when the people forget. The soil is layered with centuries of presence, footsteps, roots, bones, and rain. Every blade of grass grows from history. Every gust of wind carries fragments of voices long silent. The Mississippi does not distinguish between them. It accepts each equally and folds them into motion. To stand on its banks is to feel time moving in both directions, forward toward the future, backward into the past, until they meet in the present moment of sound and light. In the deep of night, the river glows faintly beneath the stars. Moonlight touches the surface, tracing a thin, trembling path toward the horizon. The water barely moves, yet it never stops. It hums with the low, endless vibration of existence, a tone too steady to hear until everything else is quiet. It is the sound of continuity, of patience, of the world refusing to end. The Mississippi will outlive the memory of the war that once tore around it. It will outlive the cities built upon its banks, the bridges that cross it. the nations that draw borders along its length. Long after names fade and monuments crumble, it will remain, not as witness, but as element. It will still rise with the rain, fall with the drought, twist through the plains, and pour itself into the sea. Its journey will never change, only the eyes that see it will. One day, perhaps, there will be no one left to call it by name. The maps will be redrawn by time, the language forgotten, the shorelines reshaped. And yet, even then, water will still move across the earth, tracing the memory of what was once a river. It will still carry fragments of this age, a shard of pottery, a piece of glass, a grain of soil from a forgotten field. It will still whisper through the dark, a sound older than memory itself. In that far future, the flow will continue, calm and endless. The light will still break across it each morning, and night will still fall in silence. Somewhere, unseen, life will rise again from the mud. The same rhythm, the same pattern, the same patient motion. This is how the world remembers, not through monuments or words, but through the persistence of simple things that refuse to stop. The Mississippi has become more than a river. It is an idea of time made visible, a testament to endurance, a mirror that shows what the human heart forgets to see, that all things, when given patience, find their way back to peace. The water that once divided a nation now binds it quietly together, one drop at a time. It carries no banners, no anthems, no sorrow, only light, motion, and memory blending into one endless flow. As the last light fades from the sky, the river glimmers faintly, like the surface of thought itself. The air cools, the insects still, and the water continues its long, unbroken journey toward the sea. It is neither beginning nor end, neither peace nor loss, only the calm certainty of movement. And in that movement lies the simplest truth the river has ever known. Everything changes, everything continues, and the water forever flows on.